The troops met her with respectful silence. What was the Celtic warrior Boudicca like? Even the stern Roman soldiers could not hide their shock at the sight of this army. Detachments smashed cities and villages founded by Roman conquerors. The Briton tribe of the Iceni seemed to be unstoppable. But the most striking thing was that the rioters were commanded by a woman. A tall beauty in white robes led her people into battle with the confidence of an experienced commander. It was the legendary Boudicca, a woman who continues to be talked about in Britain today. A brave warrior, she was a true leader who knew no fear. Boudicca became the heroine of her people. What prompted her to go against the mighty Rome? And how did the military path of the British Amazon end? Boudicca and her family. The time when Boudicca lived is separated from us by many centuries, and therefore it is impossible to say exactly when this woman was born, approximately in the first half of the 1st century. Also, its origin remains a mystery to historians. Some Roman historians have suggested that she was the daughter of the leader of one of the Celtic tribes living in the British Isles. It is possible that this was indeed the case, since the young Boudicca was married to the leader of the Iceni, and he, of course, would prefer to be related to a family of noble origin. Anyway, Boudicca's life was quite successful at first. Her husband Prasatag headed his tribe, and she devoted herself to taking care of the house and children. The woman had 2 daughters. They became the favorites of their father, but he still did not stop dreaming of a son heir, whom heaven never sent him. The already elderly Prasatag understood that after his death the Romans could seize power. He had no male heirs. In addition, the lands of the Iceni themselves were under the authority of the Roman emperor, to whom, according to the rules, it was required to transfer power. Roman invaders, on his deathbed, the Mtsensk leader declared his wife, daughters, and, as was necessary, the emperor as his heirs. However, according to Roman law, women in the conquered lands had no right to inherit power or title. Arriving in the possession of the Iceni, the Roman invaders staged a rout. They plundered property, taking everything from noble families and from the poor. Boudicca faced an unenviable fate. She was deprived of all privileges and publicly flogged. But a wave of furious anger and hatred for the conquerors rose in her soul later, when the honor of her daughters was encroached on in front of the unfortunate mother. It was then that Boudicca swore revenge on the Romans. Preparation. But what could she, a weak woman, do? Boudicca did not consider herself weak, and most importantly, she knew that she enjoyed great respect among her fellow tribesmen. Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, the governor of Rome, also made a lot of mistakes, who began to ravage the territories where Celtic exiles had previously taken refuge. Many people had no choice but to join the ranks of the rebels and move against the brutal invaders. Boudicca, inspiring her people by the example of the German rebels, gathered a considerable army. The Roman chronicler Dio Cassius writes, Boudicca was a red-haired woman of enormous height and strong build, with a loud and harsh voice. She shook a long spear, and the troops greeted her with respectful silence.
Boudicca's rebellion. If you believe the legends, before the uprising began in 61, she gave her troops a special signal by releasing a live hair from her hands. She was revered not only as a warrior, but also as a priestess who brought gifts to the gods, asking them to send victory. Approaching Camulodunum, now Colchester in the UK, the militia surrounded the city. The arriving Roman detachments failed to recapture the fortress and were forced to flee to Gaul. When Gaius Suetonius realized the scale of the catastrophe, the rebels had already moved to Londinium. Well, it's easy to guess here, this is modern London. He wanted to save the city, but realized that he was too late. Boudicca's troops broke into Londinium and established their order in the surrounding lands. And then, under the onslaught of the warriors' detachments, the city of Verulamium, St. Albans, fell. In each of the conquered settlements and cities, the rebels behaved no better than the Romans on their lands. They robbed and killed, carried out mass executions, staged a public massacre of local residents. Boudicca's soul was full of her own grief, and therefore the woman wanted others to suffer no less. Only in 3 major British cities, according to estimates, about 20,000 people were killed. But the temper of the gods that Boudicca worshipped turned out to be changeable. In the midst of the uprising, they stopped keeping her army. Faced with the Romans near the West Midlands, the rebels were defeated. Despite their numerical superiority, they were significantly inferior to the Romans in the technique of combat. Boudica was an intelligent woman and immediately understood how this confrontation would end. Right on the battlefield, she took poison and fell into the hands of enemies already dying. Despite the fact that this woman went against Rome, she was buried with truly royal honors. The Romans always treated natural-born warriors with special respect, one of which was the Celtic beauty Boudica.